Hey, everybody, welcome to the next edition of Future Fuzz, the digital marketing podcast. Today, I'm joined by James House, who is the Chief Commercial Officer at Reward, a global leader in customer engagement and commerce media, helping banks and brands worldwide turn everyday purchases into powerful rewards. James is a seasoned C-level executive with over 25 years experience in martech, digital strategy, loyalty, and data-driven marketing. He's helped scale SaaS and cloud-native businesses internationally, led 2 startups through a successful trade sales, and driven an AI-powered initiative for some of the world's most data-rich brands. Wow, James, what an intro. Thank you very much for joining the show.
No, thank you. Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
So let's dive straight in. Please, could you tell the listeners what Reward is all about? What solutions you provide?
Yeah, no, sure. I think Reward's a pretty unique business. And as you say, I've been in the industry a long time. And I think, working in and around, data and SaaS-based solutions, I think Reward really sits in a unique position at the intersection of banking and retail. So we combine cutting-edge technology with AI to generate data insights and to drive digital marketing really to kind of deeper customer connections. So in simple terms, what that means is really that we drive customer engagement for our banks. So we work with 7 of the 10 largest banks in the UK, as well as many other banks globally. We engage around 14 million consumers on an annual basis and see around 100 billion in terms of transactions, the volume of transactions, and that's about 140 billion in terms of sterling value that we're analyzing on a regular basis. And we take the insights that we generate from the bank data and use that to support our retail and our brands partners to deliver commerce media solutions. And that really is a form of digital advertising where we're using data and consumer insights to really drive from top of the funnel through to actually kind of completing sales, both on and offline, which is really important. Because I think a lot of brands today are really struggling with how do they navigate the omni-channel mix in terms of, their marketing spend and investment.
Right. You're communicating with the banks in, let's say, a B2B relationship that you obviously build over years, because I see that Reward was founded in 2001, so quite some time ago. But then do you also have a face towards consumers themselves, or do you do that behind the guys of the banks or their brand?
Yeah, no, good question. So yeah, the core of the business is our B2B relationship with the bank, where we're providing the loyalty platform technology so that they can engage their consumers. The banking environment today, as you're aware, is super competitive and very fragmented, and I think customers are much more fickle now in terms of, what I would call multi-apping. So, a lot of people maybe have 4 or 5 different bank accounts. They'll kind of switch quite regularly. So a big challenge for banks is how do you really kind of engender that stickiness with your customers? So our loyalty platform and proprietary technology enables, banks to kind of create that deeper connection with customers. And they do that through providing cashback opportunities. So if you spend with a bank, as part of the reward program, you will generate cash back into your account. So you may spend, £50 and generate £5 cash back that goes straight into your account. So we're engaging with the bank's customers typically primarily through the banking app, but also as other kind of digital channels emerge and evolve, and things like WhatsApp, SMS, obviously, push notifications, all the stuff that you'll kind of be, very, very kind of, seeing pretty regularly on your phone is, a lot of the time, that's the kind of channels that we use. The second part and the second kind of component of what I call our kind of flywheel is we then engage with retailers. So we engage with retail brands and, could be big grocers, department stores, fashion retailers, through to subscription businesses who want to really kind of use the insights that we have on how people are spending. We see all their transactions to better kind of target their offers to different customers.
Brilliant. You're reminding me of one of my first ever jobs. I'm showing my age now, but I used to sell mobile phones in the Orange shop. Okay. And that's when Orange probably don't even exist anymore. Used to have that deal where if you were an Orange customer, you got 2 for 1 on cinema tickets.
Yeah.
And it's that kind of partnership with a retailer, which would have been the cinemas, right? Because they had to form a relationship with the retailers as well. So you're in an interesting position because you've got to keep consumers happy with what you're doing and good incentives. And you're also maintaining a relationship with the bank, but also with a retail partner as well. That can be quite challenging, right?
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think, there's a significant trust element, as you expect, working with banks, right? And banking transaction data is obviously something that, is very sensitive, to us individually. So as you can imagine, in terms of, how we think about privacy, how we think about, the analytics that we do, the type of data that we analyze, we put in place best practices, not just to the level of GDPR or the regulation that actually go above and beyond in terms of how we anonymize data. So most of the analytics that we do to build our kind of modeling, for example, or our propensities and segmentation, we do on anonymized data. And I think it's really important to kind of stress that, because I think, that consumers are increasingly concerned about, obviously privacy issues. So there's a little bit of a, we all struggle with the paradox, don't we? That, on the one hand, we want personalization and relevance. On the other hand, we don't want intrusivity, and we don't want to feel like our data is being used beyond the purpose at which I intended.
Right, indeed. Now, you said that talking about consumer data that you can get hold of, and obviously being very careful with that, but you've also talked about having the right focus on precision, in marketing. And that could be pretty broad, right? Because that can be precision to consumers, but also in business relationships that you have.
Yeah.
Would you say that precision is a lost game because it's too complicated, there are too many channels to run on? Or do you think precision is more important than ever? What's your opinion on that?
Yeah, look, and I think probably, you won't be surprised to hear from a kind of a career data practitioner. I think, precision is more important now than ever. And I was just a couple of weeks ago, I was at the Cannes Lions Festival, and I think seeing the evolution, if you like, of having been at that kind of event probably for the first time a decade ago to where it is now, in terms of how marketers think about consumer engagement and how they take their brands to market. It's completely different, right? What was a very much a kind of brand led, in old money kind of above the line type conversation that was happening in Cannes is now completely different, right? In terms of, it's being led by AI, digital advertising, data analytics, data collaboration, retail media. All of these things are really coming to the fore. And I think that shows that there's been such a massive transition in terms of how, brand owners and brand marketers think about connecting with consumers. So I think that's kind of like the macro context, if you like. And then, to your point around how important is precision. And I think what consumers expect now, and I think where brands will be successful is not really just understanding the what, but it's the why, the how, the when, right? All the different dynamics now. And how do you bring together the plethora of data? And you're absolutely right. It can be a minefield. It can be confusing. I think, companies can get lost. I think, what AI is now enabling is really companies to harness much more effectively the different sources of data that they have. So, from our point of view, precision is very much around transactions, right? I think the ability to be able to be really precise in terms of the consumers you target, not based on what they say or what we think they might do, but actually what do they do from a spend point of view, is hugely powerful. And then to kind of augment and enrich potential blind spots, maybe by adding category level data. So I may know you shopped at Tesco, but I might not know which categories or which brands within that you've engaged. So a lot of the work we're doing now with AI is integrating kind of more granular data to kind of complement and augment what we have at a transaction level data. And you can also do, if you think about geodemographics like Mosaic and established kind of geodemographic solutions, we also append that to our data. So really trying to build a holistic picture that enables us to be much more precise.
Are you seeing any particular trend from consumers in a certain age group that's really stand out at the moment? You said a few things there, right? So back in the conversation, more and more people have multiple banking apps or services. They might use 2 or 3. Maybe some people have even 4, right?
Yep.
I mean, I'm not going to mention any brand names because I don't want to do any promo, but I've got 3.
Yeah.
Okay. When my parents, they're in their 70s, they got 1. And they've always had that.
Yeah.
And they never left that bank. In fact, probably my dad signed up in the late 70s for that account, potentially. I'll have to ask him, see what he says.
Yeah.
But is there, without sounding too cliche, but like the Gen Z way of behaving towards the millennial and the Gen X, like, are they tapping into any particular reward more than others?
Yeah, no, it's a good question, and we obviously run different programs for different banks, and again, without kind of plugging any specifically, I think they cover a spectrum of what we would call like more neobanks and fintechs, so new challenges in the market, through to the kind of more established players that probably, like you say, are parents would have opened their account when they're 18 and stayed with them for their whole life. So I think we do see the different dynamics, but I think there are actually more similarities than differences in a lot of it. Now, certainly some banking brands, naturally kind of, steer themselves more towards, younger generations, etc. But I think overall there's some real consistencies there in terms of, the battle to be, top of wallet or, front of digital wallet, I think is really, really important. I think in terms of behaviors that you see, and again, I think it's a great example where actually transaction data can tell you so much above and beyond kind of purely profiling based on age cohorts. Because I think these days, right, and again, it's a cliche about age being a number, but it's much more about how you feel, what you do. And we do a lot of work looking at kind of trends that we see from our spend data, and we've segmented based on maybe people's approach to healthy living or healthy lifestyles, for example. And I think some of the kind of old assumptions that exercise is just for the young, or people who are interested in athleisure wear 20 to 30, we can kind of debunk a lot of that, right, in terms of the data and the trends that we see. And again, not kind of over egging the point, but because it's based on what people really do, I think it's the most kind of powerful insight that you can get as a brand owner or a retailer.
Future Fuzz is sponsored by SalesSource, B2B pipeline management and sales growth for your business.
So in your role, you got quite a lot of hats, I can imagine. Chief commercial officer can, keep you awake at night maybe sometimes, or you've got too many projects running at the same time.
Yeah.
How do you touch on the B2B relationships? I'm really curious, because from my experience and working with others, finance and banking, it's not easy. How do you build those relationships? How do you maintain those relationships with the clients?
Yeah, no, look spot on. And I think, as you said, the business is 20 years old. And I think it's, very much since its kind of foundation, it had kind of consumer centricity at the heart of the business. So it was kind of established with a proposition which was actually making everyday spending and shopping more rewarding for consumers. And I think having that kind of overarching purpose for our business, I think has enabled us to kind of connect with banks in a different way to kind of what you might have with a, just a kind of standard sort of SaaS vendor type relationship, where it's maybe much more transactional, much more about performance. I think there was a kind of shared vision that we've had underpinning a lot of our banking relationships in terms of, we are giving back to consumers, and we're creating a kind of an ecosystem and a flywheel, if you like, that, the more we give back, the more customers engage, the more they engage, the more retailers spend, and it's kind of like a virtuous cycle that we've developed. So, but, the B2B environment is tough, right? You're absolutely right. And I think, for a lot of our clients, whether it's on the retail side or the banking side, the focus on return on investment is absolutely crucial. Everyone wants to, deepen customer engagement. They want to kind of create more loyal customers. They want to grow their share of their most valuable shoppers, all of that stuff. But I think it's against the backdrop of really increasing competition and consumers being much more fickle and happy to switch brands more often.
Do they want to hear about how they can retain the fickle consumer, or do they want to hear about how can they retain the big spenders? I mean, what do they want to hear?
Yeah,
they're always asking for it. So it's difficult, isn't it? In that relationship, you're like, what do you want to hear? And we're like, well, we're not really sure. And
exactly. And typically, they want to kind of achieve all of those things, right? So I think they definitely want to acquire more customers. And this is, talking to the kind of retail space, which is probably, one of the most fierce battlegrounds from a competitive point of view at the moment in any kind of industry, in the UK, Europe, and probably the world. So, they want to acquire more customers. They want to kind of get lapsed customers, customers they've maybe lost or have stopped shopping with them to come back to them. And they want to grow their share of existing shoppers, right? Because, if you think of it, being a grocery retailer, for example, you're getting a lot of spend from customers, but you can be pretty sure, right, no one only spends within one retailer. And I think there's the opportunity there to kind of work out, well, okay, these might be really loyal and valuable shoppers, but actually, you know what? from the reward data, I can see that there's, still kind of headroom of maybe 40% of their spend in the grocery category that I'm not currently accessing. So I think if you imagine, we can kind of almost like plot that course for a retailer and say, actually, these are kind of the priorities. These are where you want to target, to come back to your point around precision. And these should be the focus areas for you. Because again, I think budgets aren't growing, right? I think marketing budgets are stressed, they're pressured. So, as a CMO or, someone who's thinking about CRM and customer engagement, it's really how do you best use that budget that's driving the conversation?
It's definitely challenging at the moment. And it feels like a lot of companies are very inward looking because they can play around with these AI toys and what have you. And they're thinking like, how can we implement AI and how can we, use it to its full potential? Some companies going into hiring freezes or budget restrictions. What's your take on where things are heading? I mean, you come across as being a pretty positive guy. Well, that's the way you're coming across. Anyway, now, let's maybe rephrase the question. What are you excited about for the immediate future, and what sort of like keeps you on your toes?
Yeah, look, and I think you can't do my job without being a glass half full guy, right? So I'm definitely on the positive side of the fence.
You went to Cannes, right, and you probably were a glass half full on the back cap.
No comment about the rosé or the boats, Justin. But yeah, it was. It's all part of the experience, I guess. But look, I think obviously, you've referenced AI, and I think AI plays a huge part in terms of the opportunity for our business and also the need to move quickly, right? Because I think as you rightly pointed out, I think everyone is. If they're not, they're going to miss the boat now in terms of potential kind of leadership and winning long term in terms of their strategies if they're not embracing AI. And I think that in our business we think of it in three ways. So we think about empowering our people, with AI, which I think again for a lot of businesses is going to shape the future, and less from a position of AI is going to overtake my role or make my role redundant. I think it's really encouraging people to embrace how AI can help really then become better at their jobs and be much more kind of effective and improve productivity. So there's a people aspect to it. There's a big focus for us is on the product evolution that AI is delivering. So, within our business, personalization is really important and great personalization and what we would call hyper personalization. So really starting to get more and more personalized, is driven by the quality of the data, the mix of data sets that you can manage and create insights from. So using kind of AI and LLMs and machine learning to help kind of drive the performance of some of our hyper personalization is something that's a really big focus for us at the moment, as well as the kind of less glamorous stuff, which a kind of chief data officer will probably kill me for saying it, but is the kind of the foundations, the sort of almost like the bit beneath the surface, which is making sure that the data that we have is of the highest quality, that the data we put into our models, it delivers quality outputs. So you can imagine the volume of transactions that we see, the volume of kind of merchant IDs that we see, so kind of classification of different retailers is in the tens of millions. And we've created a model that enables us to kind of predict and more accurately manage those mids. And it's reduced the manual effort by about 70%. So there's a massive effort in terms of, productivity, right? If and data scientists typically don't come cheap, right? So if you've got people, spending their time on that versus actually maybe more kind of cutting edge innovation, it's really, really important for us.
It feels like it's going to have a huge impact on, for want of a better word, is on the back end, right? The applications are, they're endless. Yeah. And if it can, drive a lot of value, make things more relevant, for example, a classic example is email and spam filters, right?
Yeah. People
are getting too many emails, companies step in, right? The consumer's getting annoyed, the consumer votes with their feet. So we need to fix this problem. If a consumer sees that something is highly personalized without feeling that their data is being jeopardized, they can engage with that. They'll be happier. They get a better deal. Everyone's happier in the end. It feels like the applications are definitely impact on the back end. Where I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this as well, it does feel like it's kind of from a consumer user perspective and also at work too, in business, it's kind of slapped on like there's an AI plugin slapped on there and you can chat to it for a bit. Don't really think that's going to fly in the long term. Curious to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, no, it's really interesting, right? And I think chatting to a few people, and again, it was sort of, part of the discussion at Cannes was the kind of, the role of AI. And if you think of, I guess a lot of digital advertising, right, has been sort of, and the budgets have been channeled into, the kind of the walled gardens, right, the Googles, the Metas, and it goes into their kind of system, and they manage it, they tell you how it performed, and and I think it can at times, I think, for advertisers and brands feel slightly opaque. I think, with the advent of the kind of open internet, right, which is basically, fragmentation of much more digital media, plethora of different ways to connect with consumers. And I would, kind of classify rewards sort of like financial media network as part of that, as well as, retail media networks and other commerce media ecosystems. And I think that's kind of creating much more fragmentation now. And I think that there will be a kind of coming together, I think, in the industry where data collaboration becomes much more important and people openly share data rather than the kind of the sort of the walled garden approach, which was, okay, well, if you want to do something with me, Meta, this is how my kind of piece of the jigsaw works. So something that's much more, I think, consistent for advertisers. And then I think, the other element is, how we shop. And I know it's early days and kind of, people, sometimes, when I talk about this, kind of go, you're kind of going mad, are you for real? But I think how we search and get information is going to change. And, I use ChatGPT, for example, a lot more to kind of, ask questions, find information. It used to be Google was the default, right? Go Google it, right?
I've hardly Googled anything the last week.
Yeah, it's amazing. And it's kind of, if you suddenly look back, you think, well, actually, I've really changed a lot in the last maybe 6-9 months. In terms of how I do that. And so almost like the kind of agentic element of it in terms of, okay, tell me where I can, I don't know, find a linen blazer to wear to Wimbledon or whatever it might be. So that the challenge for advertisers will be, well, how do you connect into that ecosystem, of agents, for example, who are serving up recommendations back to consumers. And then maybe some of the kind of, I say more traditional digital channels, if you know what I mean.
James, we could have a whole other podcast on the answer economy. Have you heard of that? Have you heard that?
Yeah.
I'm moving into the answer economy. Yeah. And then how everyone has to get their, consumer interfaces, websites, you name it, forms, agent ready. Exactly. It's going to be agents all the way, like find me a bank and sign me up.
Yeah.
Exciting times. James, brilliant having you on. And I've just got a picture of you now sitting on the back of the boat in Cannes, sipping on a rosé wine. I wish I was there. I wasn't this year.
That's another podcast I'll tell for you. I'll explain.
The Media World podcast or whatever. Yeah. But we covered some really interesting stuff there. Covered a lot, looking at how are you communicating with banks, that B2B relationship, but also looking at the importance of relevant data without consumers feeling though they're being cheated, right? And people are using our data in certain ways. The impact of AI. It's been an absolute pleasure coming on the show. You wouldn't have said that you've only done one podcast today, so that was really good. Thank you.
No, thanks very much. Thanks for making it a great session.
Thanks for tuning in and making the choice to listen to this podcast. If you liked what you've heard today, please don't forget to subscribe.